I just got back from Port Aransas, and I can't stop thinking about the salty vibes and sun-soaked memories from the Texas coast. Port Aransas is such a unique beach town. It's a place where family traditions unfold naturally, like surfing with my daughter, and beauty lies both in island views and the unhurried moments between adventures, like parasailing with the entire family. One visit and you'll see why generations of Texans have anchored their traditions to the island life. Start your new favorite family traditions in Port Aransas, Texas. Go to visitportaransas.com and plan your trip to Houston's beach. Downtown Houston is setting the stage for the World Cup, and bold upgrades to public spaces are already in motion, especially along Main Street. The sidewalks are getting a major glow up with more shade, more space, and more of what you love. And Houston-owned small businesses are still open and serving up all the downtown magic. From morning coffee runs and happy hour hangouts to late night vibes, these local gems are powering through construction to keep the city buzzing. So grab your crew and meet me on Main Street, because the transformation is happening now and your support means everything. Today on CityCast Houston, Mayor John Whitmire says local police are not cooperating with federal immigration agents for President Trump's mass deportations. But now Houston police called ICE on a woman who called 911. Let's get into it. It's Monday, June 30th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Here with Sam González Kelly, reporter with the Houston Chronicle, who's been covering this case. Sam, welcome back in. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
And I also have Maria Espinosa, who works at the largest immigrant-led civil rights organization in Texas called FIEL. Maria, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to jump right into this because there are several layers to this case. Let's start with the basics, Sam. Can you explain what happened after this woman called 911 to report domestic abuse by her ex-husband? Something that sadly happens a lot in Houston.
Yeah. So the official police report of this incident that we obtained through a public records request, it's pretty sparse on details, but it does indicate that, this woman called police because of incident with her ex-husband, who she has a order of protection against in Harris County. And so police arrived and they ran her name through the computer database that they do for every, encounter that they have. And her name pinged for a administrative warrant from ICE that indicated she had an order of removal stemming from an asylum case that she did not win several years ago. And so the police officer called ICE to alert them of this, and ICE declined to come to the scene because they said that there was no one to take custody of her children.
Wow. So if there was somebody to take custody of her children, she would have been removed from the country by ICE.
That would be a little bit too speculative for me to say confidently one way or the other.
Okay.
We've logged about 60 incidents in which Houston police have called ICE for these kinds of administrative warrants. Mm-hmm. The majority of these incidents, ICE does not come out to arrest the person at that moment. Okay. They usually tell police that they'll come back at another time. There have been a few incidents in which ICE has, on the spot gone out and arrested that person. But yeah, it would be too hard for me to say, what would have happened.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Maria, you're on the front lines working with FIEL. You are, working with the undocumented residents of our city. How often do you see this type of situation?
Well, I want to speak a little bit more about how people in the immigrant community are really scared to cooperate and report this because of situations like Sam just mentioned, right? Most of the times it'll be a victim that wants or that needs help, but they're afraid to call because of their legal status, right? And what that could potentially put them at risk of deportation and stuff like that. So we see this happening really often, especially right now, with the mistrust. For example, in Colony Ridge, there were ICE operations happening, and it's still something that's ongoing. And so people are scared to call and report crimes, which ultimately doesn't just affect the immigrant community or, undocumented folks, but it affects everybody in general.
Now, Maria, when you say that they are afraid to call the authorities, do you mean for domestic violence crime, family violence, or just crime in general?
Just crime in general, and that's really concerning. I mean, there's already barriers. There's the fear of deportation, language barriers, and now there's a lack of trust in law enforcement, and there's limited access to resources as well. So as FIEL, we want them to have access to those resources and know what their rights are, so that they feel free to report these types of crimes and abuse.
Yeah, that's so important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress. But Sam, I want to take a step back. With HPD, what was their policy like with cooperating with ICE before Trump?
Good question. So in the current moment, the reason why HPD officers are calling ICE is because ICE added 700,000 names to this national law enforcement database, where now if a police officer runs someone's name and they have an administrative warrant, usually for an order of removal, not necessarily a warrant in the traditional sense for a criminal charge or something like that, then their name will show up in this law enforcement system and indicate that they have a warrant with ICE and that ICE needs to be called. So before the Trump administration added all of these names to this database, these calls to ICE did happen, but they were extremely rare. Based on my colleagues' reporting, I believe it might happen like 1 or 2 times a year. Since the addition of all of these warrants to this law enforcement database, that number has gone up to the point that between January and the end of May, I believe it was 58 times that HPD has called ICE because one of these warrants has popped up in their system.
I want to dig into this because this is where I'm a little confused, Sam, because Mayor Whitmire and HPD have denied that HPD is cooperating with ICE, but these records seem to indicate the opposite. And the investigation that you and your colleague have done, it's outstanding. But even an HPD spokesperson told the Chronicle that they're following protocol. So that means that if someone has an active ICE warrant, they have to notify ICE. Why is the mayor denying this? What am I missing here? Because it sounds like they are working with ICE.
Well, yeah, it's a little confusing for us too. I don't want to speak for the mayor. As I understand it, their position is that these warrants are now part of the national law enforcement database that Houston police, like law enforcement agencies across the country, use routinely. And that when a warrant appears for ICE, that they have no choice but to contact that agency the way they would if a warrant appeared, out of Fort Bend County or Louisiana or wherever else. So that's my understanding of the situation. But the police department's own records do show that Houston police have been calling ICE in these situations. And I'm not sure how you square those two things.
Maria, what kind of message does this send to our immigrants in Houston, whether they're documented or not?
Yeah, not a good message at all, obviously. The thing is, some of these people who have warrants or orders of deportation isn't necessarily because they themselves have committed a crime. It's just that the system really has failed them in a way, So, of course, people who have committed crimes, we want them off the street. But most of the times, that's not what's actually going on, that they committed a crime. It's most of the times, again, that the system just failed them. But it doesn't send a good message at all. It's a difficult situation because it puts the victim in a position where they're not able to look for help. The people that we should we should be able to rely on to protect the community is not doing its job per se, right? Because they're already putting those barriers and will really making it difficult for the community to trust.
Maria, how is FIEL responding? What kind of action are y'all taking?
Yes, so the field team is actually going to Colony Ridge and Cleveland, Texas, and conducting a survey with the people living there who have been affected by some of these raids and arrests. We're doing this because we've heard that law enforcement is not working with ICE, but that's not what our community members are telling us. So that's what the survey is for, so that then with data we can go and talk to the mayor or to whoever we have to, and let them know what's actually happening and give them specific numbers.
Yeah, and Colony Ridge, up in Cleveland, Texas. So not specifically in Houston, but this is something that is happening across the region. So I want to bring this back to Houston real quickly, Sam, because you talked to the president of the Houston Police Officers Union, Doug Griffith. What did he have to say about HPD and the connection they have with ICE now?
Yeah, I'll clarify. That was not me who spoke with the union president. That was my colleague, Matt DeGrood, who covers criminal justice here at the Chronicle. But the police union president told Matt, that HPD is not collaborating with ICE, that they're not, asking people's immigration status, which maybe that's kind of where the distinction at the city between, calling ICE when there's a warrant versus quote unquote collaborating with ICE. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's where that distinction comes in for them, that they're not actively asking people about their immigration status. But the union president's taking largely the same tack as the mayor.
If they don't work with ICE, are they at risk of losing funding or something? Like, what am I missing here? Because again, this is still so confusing to me how this is happening.
Again, maybe not for me to say explicitly with regards to Houston, but certainly, we've seen the Trump administration threatening the loss of funding to other large, democratically led cities in the country like Chicago and Los Angeles, if they don't cooperate with his immigration initiatives. So it wouldn't be, I don't think it would be a stretch to say that if Houston, took those same kind of confrontational stances that other large blue cities are taking, that, they might be threatened with that same loss of funding, and that may be a reason why Houston is, not making a huge public display of resistance to the Trump administration, at least at the governmental level.
Gotcha. So they are not asking residents of our city that, hey, what is your immigration status? But they are running the name, which now has 700,000 plus more names in this ICE database, and searching for that. And if there is an active warrant, then they will contact ICE and have contacted ICE based on your investigation. And if they don't, there's this fear that the Trump administration, who made this big promise during the election cycle that they are going to deport criminals who are undocumented, there could be some retaliation. Maria, as somebody who's working with the people, and I think we forget about this, these are actual people who are living here, who have lives. How does that make you feel? What goes through your mind when you hear this?
I think personally, it's very sad. From my own personal story, I come from a family of immigrants. My parents, they immigrated here from Mexico, and I was an immigrant myself and undocumented as well. So I understand, and it's difficult to see what's happening because it's triggering to somebody who's already been through it themselves. My dad, he was deported as well. And I'm not going to disclose too much information about him, but just the fact of that family separation, when when the arrest and the deportation happens and the effect that it has on a family is very triggering. And it it brings up a lot of emotions. It's sad. It makes you angry. It makes you want to do something. And so that's why I think the work that FIEL is doing is so important. And we're calling everybody to action so that we can do something so that families can stop being separated. And so our rights are being respected, right? Because everybody has rights. And I think that's often forgotten, especially with our community. They're under so much attack, and it's coming from everywhere because it almost feels like it's more accepted now to vocalize racism. So even with these warrants, it's interesting to me to question exactly how many of these warrants are valid. And even if people do fear, I think it's important for them to know their rights, because if they know their rights, this could be the difference between them being arrested unjustly versus, them actually having a warrant and having to follow through with that.
Yeah. Looking for a getaway that's equal parts relaxation and adventure? Then it's time to choose your chill at Margaritaville Lake Resort, Lake Conroe, Houston. Right now, you can pick from 3 amazing offers to match your perfect escape, like stay longer and save more. That means more time to unwind and enjoy everything Margaritaville has to offer, like my favorite, hanging out by the resort-style pool with a cold drink. And if you're looking for a weekday retreat, Margaritaville Lake Resort has you covered. Book a weekday stay and score a $50 credit to use on spa treatments, dining, and more at the resort. And for our everyday heroes like nurses, teachers, first responders, and military personnel, you can relax lakeside with a special $99 heroes rate. No matter how you chill, there's a deal with your name on it. And it's all just an easy 1-hour drive north of Houston. So what are you waiting for? Head to Margaritaville Resort, LakeConroe.com and choose your chill today.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Sam, can you tell me about the woman who had ICE called on her after she called her ex-husband, the case that we're talking about for domestic violence? Why does she have an active warrant?
Well, she came to the United States 7 years ago with 2 of her children. Her ex-husband had already traveled to the United States, and like a lot of people in El Salvador, she was receiving threats from the local gangs, and for her family's safety, followed her then partner here to Houston. She pleaded for asylum and lost her case several years ago. And so ever since she lost her case, she has been living here unlawfully and has had that deportation order in the system ever since.
Yeah, how bad did the violence get at home?
Well, she left him several years ago and obtained this order of protection against him. But when they were together, he would become pretty physically abusive. And she said that even after the protective order that she gained, he would still find her and threaten her with weapons. And so it seemed like, there was an ongoing threat there.
Family violence is a growing concern in Houston. It's something that we actually spoke to District Attorney Sean Tier about, and he wants to create a domestic violence special bureau. Almost a quarter of homicides last year in Harris County were related to domestic violence. And with this case, advocates are calling this the worst case scenario for victims of family violence. Why is that, Sam?
Yeah, it's a worst case scenario because in an ideal world, you want the victim of a crime like this to feel safe calling law enforcement, whose job it is to protect the community, regardless of their immigration status. And when victims of domestic violence don't feel safe to call law enforcement, it gives their abusers, tremendous power over them in what is usually an already, fraught situation to find yourself in. And it could potentially remove, a real avenue of help from these very vulnerable people who have been victims of a crime.
Sam, in this case, do you think this victim would call 911 again?
Yeah, she told me that she likely would not, because, now she knows that her name is in this system and that, police have called ICE on her already. She said that it would be unlikely that she would call again.
Maria, this is something that seems like a common theme within our community, especially with immigrants.
Yes, and that's very true. And just in our office, we have a lot of calls every day, and it has exceeded our capacity, I would say, because we provide a lot of different services. But recently, we've been getting a lot of calls where people are asking for counseling or even just somebody to hear them out because they don't know what to do or they don't know where to go.
Oh, wow. So what do you tell them?
We have our legal clinic. So if there's any type of relief that they can access through in a domestic violence case, we go ahead and provide them with free consultations or a consultation with one of our attorneys so that they can guide them through what that process might look like and also explain, how these things have to be reported.
And then we come back to the same thing. It has to be reported, but there's a fear of reporting it. And, with this victim, Sam, one thing that stood out to me, I know you said that she wouldn't call the officers, but I think we didn't mention that it was to the point where she said that she feels like she wouldn't survive, like her story would end. Maria, what are the resources that are available for people that are faced with family violence and are scared to call 911?
There's resources in Houston like the Women's Center. Again, they can always call our office. We can provide them with some sort of legal aid if there's any. Depending on the case, we do cases pro bono sometimes as well. We like to uplift their stories, and sometimes once they get some media coverage as well, then it almost feels that for the families, it empowers them and it helps them kind of lose that fear, and it helps the community also provide more support. So even if they themselves don't have a good family group that's supportive, when that happens, more community comes around to help and bring them some aid.
And then just like looking ahead, like when you lose trust within the community, how long does it take to rebuild that?
It's kind of speculative, but you see it in marginalized communities across the country where trust with law enforcement can be shaky. That mistrust is something that's been built up over generations and it doesn't disappear overnight. And so consistent actions can have long-term consequences.
What do you think, Maria?
It's going to take a lot of work. Like I said, that's why we're doing this survey, right, in Cleveland. And we're hoping to continue doing these surveys in Houston and in surrounding areas like more in the South, like in Alvin as well, because it's going to take a lot of work. And we've seen that the administration and the people that are going after undocumented immigrants are using numbers and using data. So we want to use the same thing and show them what's really happening, that it's not just speculation.
Sam, Maria, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raheel.
That was Maria Espinosa of FIEL, the largest immigrant-led civil rights organization in Texas, along with Sam González Kelly, who covers demographics for the Houston Chronicle. I want to hear from you and get your thoughts on how HPD should or should not be working with ICE. Send me a voice message by calling 713-489-6972. And if you want to talk in person, we are having a 713-day pre-party at St. Arnold Brewing on July 10th from 5:30 to 7:30. 7:30 p.m. The entire CityCast Houston team will be there, so let's talk about it in person. We're also giving away free drinks to the first 25 people who show up, and we're doing a giveaway for a stay at Margaritaville Lake Resort Lake Conroe, but you have to be at the event, so please RSVP with the link in our show notes. Help us grow the show by sharing this episode with 3 of your friends who care about our immigrant community and Houston's diversity so they can learn about the latest. You can also help us grow the show by giving us a rating and reviewing the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you haven't subscribed, don't wait. Hit that button so we can be part of your daily routine. Want more Houston news, happenings, food wrecks, and more? Subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Houston, with the link in our show notes. That will do it for today. I'm Raheel Ramzanali. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new.